Welcome, everyone, to the first and inaugural Green Circle Live. Very happy to be here today. My name is Eric Wright. I'm otherwise known as @DiscoPosse on Twitter, or Disco Posse here in the Green Circle, if that's where you're watching us, which hopefully you are. I'm inviting here with a very special guest, Craig Tracy. Craig Tracy, if you want to take a moment and introduce yourself, and then we can talk about back in Stack and what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, Eric. Thanks for having me. So my name is Craig Tracy, otherwise known as @Craig_Tracy on Twitter. Very vocal about OpenStack and all things sort of cloud. Been working in the cloud ecosystem for roughly 4 to 5 years now. First beginning with Amazon EC2 and that product line, and in the beginning of 2012, actually probably more like the end of 2011, I started delving into OpenStack and have been involved in OpenStack since. Currently the technical lead for the Blue Box Cloud product at Blue Box, and that means pretty much everything soup to nuts about OpenStack, operations, development, you name it. So very busy in that front.
Excellent. Now we had one attendee as well who was held back right now. So if you're looking for our good friend VM Trooper or Trevor Roberts Jr., he's unable to join right at the moment. But we're going to go ahead, without Trevor, because that's the magic of live television here. So, but again, thank you, Craig, for coming out today.
You got it.
As a rep, in what we're doing, in OpenStack, and I work at VM Turbo. And we're doing a lot of work around OpenStack right now. The cool thing is that, it's kind of revisiting a lot of the strategies that we used to talk about before. There we go. Sorry, we've got Trevor joining us as
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. So I will take a moment before we get rolling here and introduce Trevor. So Trevor, tell us about yourself, and thanks for coming out today. I see that you're wearing a VMUG tag, so we're have you at the Silicon Valley VMUG.
Yes, that is correct, and slight technical difficulties with convention Wi-Fi as always, so apologies for the tardiness. My name is Trevor Roberts Jr., and I'm the Senior Technical Marketing Manager at VMware that's focused on OpenStack. So thank you, Eric, for having me. I'm a big fan of doing community work and giving back to everyone who has helped me out.
Excellent. Yeah. So what we're trying to to look at, and this seemed like a great venue. So I work with VM Turbo. We run this Green Circle community, and it's far above what we do in our core. It's actually a real good wide range community, and as I said, we've talked about strategies that are getting revisited. OpenStack has kind of opened the doors to rethinking the way we do things. It's a fundamental shift in the same way that public cloud was, and when Amazon came on board. When we look at what VMware did with virtualization, when we look at what Hyper-V is becoming, and how they're pushing out into Azure, they're making huge ground. Where we would have laughed at what they were doing 5 years ago, now they're real key players. OpenStack is kind of in that same place. So when I looked at recently I wrote about something, it was the 5-year mission. It was on the super user blog, and it was very cool because it talked about, 5 years in, where is OpenStack, what are we doing? We're kind of going back to this dev core concept, and there was a lot of really neat architectural and sort of somewhat political decisions that we're making about how we're driving the OpenStack ecosystem. And then I looked and I said, well, a lot of people are complaining, saying, like, is OpenStack ready? When the real question is, are we ready for OpenStack? And then I went back and looked at 5 years in with Microsoft, and 5 years in with VMware. Where were those ecosystems? And they were pretty much in the same spot that OpenStack is today. But the cool thing is the way in which OpenStack is being brought to the fore, and the people that are involved, and that's a real key thing. As you said, Trevor and Craig both, we've talked about community. So maybe let's take a couple of minutes and talk about how you got started with OpenStack. So Craig, how did OpenStack become your thing that you worked on?
Sure. So like I said, back in 2011, I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, for those people that don't know. And I was working at a company that did petabytes upon petabytes of storage backup. We started looking for different platforms that we'd like to deploy our platform on, or different frameworks we'd like to deploy the platform on. And OpenStack popped up. At that point, it was kind of, very, very early on. We're talking pre-Diablo probably. And ironically, I worked about a block away from where the Boston Summit was held, and I missed the Boston Summit. But the following year, I changed jobs. I worked at a company called HubSpot. At HubSpot, we had a very large EC2 presence. Probably when I was there, around 1,800 instances, steady state, and that's not even including things like EBS and whatnot. We were running jobs. We had a large presence there with HBase and Hadoop. We were looking to see what we could do there to get better performance. At that time, we didn't have things like cluster compute instances and whatnot, and OpenStack seemed like an obvious choice. Started building out OpenStack there, and in, I guess it was November of 2013, I left HubSpot and moved on to Blue Box. Kept doing OpenStack, and I guess here I am today, basically leading the team at Blue Box around OpenStack. We have some really, really great engineers, and we're delivering private cloud as a service. So we're treating OpenStack the way we believe it's meant to be delivered, which is a service offering. And you can come to Blue Box, sign up, and we'll provide you at a minimum a three-node OpenStack cluster. You can scale that all the way up to whatever your needs may be. And we manage all of that for you. We don't expect you to be an OpenStack expert. We expect you to do your core competency and do it really well, and we will manage the rest of it.
That's really cool, because the service aspect of it is where a lot of folks are really getting strong. A lot of vendors are coming to the ecosystem saying, hey, we get that OpenStack is not easy, and nor is any cloud operating system. A private cloud is not difficult. There was the survey that happened recently, which was kind of from Gartner, and they talked about why private clouds fail, which it was a rather incendiary title to it. They said only 5% failed, but we had 140 respondents, and there was about 65% that it was still going. It hadn't failed. It wasn't quite going as cool as they thought it could. We actually just did a recent survey, which we had over 1,200 responses on what people are thinking about with OpenStack, and it was really great. We've got huge uptake on information that people that are looking at it, that are running it. They're running it in different styles. So we're actually going to publish that soon and get that data out to folks, because this is very, very cool information to help to drive things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You've done a lot of things. I've been working with you off and on, for a couple of years around OpenStack stuff through the Couch to OpenStack series and vBrown Bag and other things. So how did OpenStack kind of become something that became your thing?
Sure. So a few years ago, my employer at the time sent me to the OpenStack Summit in Portland, and it was amazing to see the amount of community focus, the energy that was happening at the convention center. They were pretty much filled to capacity, and every single session, especially around software-defined networking, was filled to standing room only. And it was a good thing the fire marshal wasn't there, and they probably would have shut down the event. But it was good to see the energy and to see the focus on let's make private cloud adoption better. And shortly after that, I started working in production with OpenStack for Cisco with their cloud initiatives, and then I wanted to get more of a community focus in the work that I do. So I looked at VMware, and they had a technical marketing position open up, focused specifically on their VMware integrated OpenStack offering, aiming to make OpenStack on VMware a seamless experience. I mean, VMware has contributed a lot to the community as far as the Cinder drivers and Nova drivers, and especially the networking components. So, but now this is a formalized product offering that we want to help VMware admins have an easier time with deploying and managing OpenStack. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stop, helping the community or contributing to open source. That focus will always be there and will continue to grow.
Nice. Yeah, open source, of course, is a powerful part of what grew this ecosystem. And there's huge proponents on the value and advantage of open sourcing content. There's challenges that go along with it, and we've each individually probably done different open source contributions and seen it go well and seen it be sort of challenged. And I kind of hear a lot of folks when they want to get started that there's been difficulty in both learning the process of contributing to an open source project or project for my American friends. and even the process of getting your company involved in an open source program, because
Right.
that's, sometimes it's understanding what the potential legal implications are and whatnot. Now, we're all involved in companies that are contributing back directly to OpenStack right into the core, and we've probably each had our own challenges, and as we head into the Kilo release, not only is it, getting code in there, but, understanding feature sets, so maybe that's going to bring into the question of, what's coming up in OpenStack that's kind of cool for you, or what's there today that's, that versus a year or 2 years ago that you say, like, I think OpenStack is ready because I'm seeing growth and innovation in this area. Craig, what's kind of a hot spot and some key features that you're seeing that are really helping to drive it?
So I think for us, at least with Kilo, I haven't dug deep on new Kilo features just quite yet. But one of the feature sets that we're very interested in is Keystone Federation. And the reason why we're interested in that is we do have customers who have multiple stacks. We have who are primarily doing it for DR reasons and availability reasons, but we would like to have them have a single auth. And right now we don't have that. Certainly something that we want to make happen, and we're actually currently working on that as we speak. But more, I think, besides feature sets, I think the thing that I see changing, and I'm very happy to say that this is the case, is that there's a renewed focus on the user and the operator experience. This is now, I think this is the third cycle in a row we've had the mid-cycle operators summit. The first one was in Santa Clara, second one was in San Antonio, and then just about a month or so ago we had one in Philadelphia. And it's great to see that the components, OpenStack is not a product per se, right? It has always been termed an integrated release. And there are pieces that every single operator or every single user has to basically carve up on their own, whether you're doing HA, whether you're adding in monitoring, or you have interest in log aggregation, or the pieces around it. And it's great to see that there's a renewed focus on the user and the user experience, as well as a meeting of the minds to basically come together and deliver best practices amongst operators. And in that group, we have many large-scale operators, so we've seen it at scale as well. So I think that's really, really promising.
Yeah, that's definitely the focus on who's consuming the service and running these services when they're on site. It's not only being able to do it and engage a vendor like yourselves or other key players that are out there in a service or like a packaged OpenStack offering, but to be able to go in and continuously manage that. And HA, despite what many would have told us it's unnecessary, is definitely a real requirement in a lot of spots. Trevor, what's kind of the standout features that you kind of see that are maybe in coming up in Kilo or stuff that's in Juno that's really helps drive more people to it for you?
Well, Greg touched on a really important one, the federated identity. I think for customers, or sorry, large organizations that want to have multi-region, multi-AZ type deployments, it'll make their lives a lot easier if they have a single source of truth when it comes to identity. I know that for the community in general, the distributed virtual router is a big deal. We're using different technology at VMware, but for the community in general, it's great to see them have access to that type of technology, make their lives easier as well from a networking perspective. But for me, the greatest thing, and Craig also touched on it, so it sounds like I'm copying from him, but the operations aspect of OpenStack, I think VMware is talking to a lot of enterprise type environments, maybe less complications around deployments are always welcome for those type of businesses. So as more enterprises come into the fold of the OpenStack community, it'll be good to see the community continue to embrace the plight of the operators and to continue making their lives a bit easier. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the operations talks at the Kilo Summit, or sorry, the next summit at Vancouver.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely. Enterprise it's something that I've been talking about for a long time. While the ecosystem can continue to grow and live, and flourish in its current form and in a lot of software centric and sort of big scale folks that are kind of, they were already ready for cloud. the reality is that we're looking at customers that are currently running enterprise workloads, which when I talk about an enterprise, I think of it as like high availability, workloads that are going to be placed and have to be maintained with a quality of service and uptime understanding and being able to do failovers in HA. Keystone Federation is massive. That was definitely top of my favorite list right now as well, because the idea to be able to have multiple AZs and be able to have them communicate and have one central repository of auth and information, it's massive, because that's been a big challenge for folks. That great, we've embraced OpenStack, now we're going to deploy it all over. Like, oh, okay, yeah, it's how do we architect this thing to be multi-site and really think about it. Looking at what VM Turbo has been doing, our big focus has always been on the operator view and people that are running it, because the old school, cloud method, which is funny, I call it old school, but that traditional cloud method is like just fire the workload in, never think about it again, shut it down as needed. They'll know. We're just going to tell them we're going to shut it off, and it'll come back on an hour later. No one will care. That's why a lot of the work that we're doing is around ensuring that performance. Ultimately it's application performance is what we're after, but assuring that quality of service across the entire cloud, so that when workloads are placed, not only are they placed in the correct spots, but they're actually continuously maintained in that right spot, and using the other features that are there, like the live migration capabilities, and taking advantage of those, so that we can assure that application performance, and getting the best out of all that infrastructure that's already there. Because we've got a lot of folks that are deploying OpenStack, and they say, okay, great, it's up and running, and they pat themselves on the back, which they should, because that's like a decathlon sometimes for people.
Right.
But then they go, okay, now what? And maintaining it and continuing to operate that is a big thing.
And Craig, Eric, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's funny that you mentioned the whole HA aspect and things like that, because I thought it was funny that I saw advertisements the other day for big public cloud providers talking about, well, you can have end user live migration, so you're avoiding downtime, or you can have your own recovery practices, whereas, the whole pets versus cattle debate, that's been raging on. I think even the public cloud providers are seeing that some of the traditional HA elements are necessary for customers, especially as enterprise customers adopt more cloud. And I'll go back on mute so I don't interrupt you again.
Yeah, I think when people say that they don't need HA, that's like when your spouse says that they don't need a gift for their birthday because there's no need to spend the money. That's a trap, because we know really we should be building for HA, and it's entirely possible for us to do this. That technologically it's there. So in 2 years we'll joke about how, remember when there was no HA at all. But it's definitely the move towards that classic enterprise view is definitely there. So Craig, is like as an operator, you're building these things to be able to be run. How does your experience in running products help to when you kind of drive features and when you want to feed back into the ecosystem saying, hey folks, we need this feature, this has got to matter to people?
Sure. So we've I'd say that's a weird one to answer for our role a little bit. So we're primarily consuming almost vanilla OpenStack. We are we do apply patches on top of certain services that we find that we need to patch. We are digging into the code, but for the most part, we are delivering vanilla OpenStack with certain features on top of it, like specific SAN integrations, network integrations, and whatnot. And so we've had pretty good luck in that respect. One area that we've fought for a long time, and let me give a little bit of background. We've had a managed hosting business for, I guess we're going on 12 years now. And almost from the inception, we've had a product called Blocks Load Balancer. And one of the things that we've seen that's been really missing from the OpenStack ecosystem is a load balancing component for, I think there is one that's, we've gone through this, and there's one that's in Neutron, but we found that at least the initial versions are not functional, and they're not ready for production deployment. We spent a lot of time working with the community on Neutron, the LBAS components of Neutron. In fact, I submitted a very large pull request that actually got accepted this cycle, even though I did it about a year ago. So that's my free pass to Vancouver. So we are interested. That's one area that we're very interested in. That project eventually got spun out to a project called Octavia, which is currently in StackForge. So, but remember, we are also a small organization. So we try to affect the components that we think are necessary for our customers. But I'd say more of our value add for the open source community is around how to operate it. We have probably one of the de facto Ansible playbook repositories for OpenStack. I think for X-Base Private Cloud would be the other one. And in fact, we from time to time collaborate on these pieces as well. I once, in my Paris talk, I was thinking about whether, I once thought that installation was a solved problem, and it actually, I learned that it is not. And I thought about this again this week. Right now we have about 15,000 lines of code in our repository for Ansible. And I looked at some stats just, I think, yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday. And we brought on a new engineer in November. And since November, he has over 5,000 new lines of code. So this is definitely not a solved problem yet. And I like to think that some of the impact that we're making on the community in terms of open source has to do with operations as well as installation and getting started with a new OpenStack stack.
Yeah, I think, and that brings that great point of, we're never done. No one's going to go, all right, perfect, we did it. Let's sit back on this for a year and just enjoy it, because regardless of whether we've moved away from this idea of the integrated releases and whatever, the code is still going to upgrade. The programs are still going to move ahead, or projects. I'm sure that they'll be called projects again in the next release, and they'll be back to programs. It's dangerous to try and write documentation these days for OpenStack, because I don't know what to call anything anymore.
Yeah. The other thing that gets us quite a bit too is you're not even dealing with just OpenStack, right? You're dealing with all of the dependencies that lie underneath. So whether it's KVM or QEMU2 or a different version of HA proxy or Rabbit, all of those components are things that you need to think about when you're deploying this stuff. And this isn't, for better or for worse. I think for better is these things are constantly moving, and it's a lot to keep up with. So yes, you're right. Our job will never be over. As good as we do it, I don't think we'll ever be done.
Trevor, I know we heard Ansible in there. I know you've recently been a part of authoring a DevOps book which is very, very cool, and I've seen a lot of the stuff you've done. So orchestration is key, on both sides of the stack, really. I think, both driving the infrastructure as well as the underlying infrastructure, and then driving the workload infrastructure as well. What's your thought on that? As we look at an operator's view, what's the focus in what we should be learning and looking at, especially in an OpenStack platform?
Sure. That's actually a huge part of what VMware is trying to do to help the customers get onto OpenStack quickly. We're leveraging technologies like Ansible. We're leveraging best practices from the community in general, just to help customers have a highly available production-ready deployment from a single appliance. It spawns multiple nodes, controls them with Ansible and so forth, and makes sure that they're up and reliable. So we understand that just getting your feet wet with OpenStack in production is a huge thing, and it can be a deterrent if people are not having a good experience. So my advice for anyone who is just getting started in OpenStack, it's great to know how to configure the configuration files, manually, but definitely dive headfirst into whatever configuration management technology, is your favorite, whether it be Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Microsoft desired state configuration, whatever it is that you want to get into. Definitely look at the efforts by the community. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, and definitely try to take that into your deployments as well as your ongoing maintenance. The whole ethos of configuration management is you're never modifying a server manually. Everything is done by configuration management. It's being controlled with source code management, with Git or Mercurial, whatever you're using. Definitely take that software-defined infrastructure type view of how you want to manage your environment.
Very cool. Well, I know that we've got a lot of stuff that's cool around the OpenStack ecosystem, and one of the great things is the summit itself. The summits, as I've now have been to two of them, and you folks have who are watching have probably been to a few, and you two fellows who are here definitely have been to a couple at least on your own. The summit has grown in sort of size, and it's grown and evolved in the type of audience that's there. I'm sure that if they look back, that the first summit was probably a dozen people sitting in a room and talking about what they just did for the last 6 months, and how do we do this and scale it, and then there was probably a scaling of the audience size as well. It's curious to see that growth. I think we had I'm just ballparking like 4,000 to 5,000 or so, like 4,800 or so that were in Paris. Atlanta was good size as well. So Vancouver, it's kind of cool because having it in my home country is pretty awesome. So I'll be glad to be there and actually doing the Couch to OpenStack session, which is going to be a lot of fun. So maybe if you guys want to talk about what you've gotten out of the summit, what you think of the OpenStack Summit, and a good way to consume that, and what are your plans going into Vancouver? Craig, what have you got? I imagine you've probably got some talks, hopefully.
I don't have a talk this time. At Blue Box we have a number of talks though, and all of those are listed on our website. This time I decided to take a break from talking, maybe next one in Tokyo. But I did give a talk in Paris, and I had a panel in Atlanta, and so HubSpot actually did a failed keynote in Portland. That was, some of you may remember that. So I've been going to the summit since San Francisco, so I think that's what, 6 or 7 now or something like that. In fact, as I was between jobs, I even went to Hong Kong, sorry, I lost that there for a second, on my own dime. And the nice thing about the summits, at least if you're a contributor to OpenStack, is you're going to get in for free. My general mode there is I'm pretty much hanging out in the design sessions. There, as I alluded to before, there's also been a renewed focus on operators. So for perhaps the last 2 or 3 summits, there's been breakout days that are strictly dedicated towards operations, so I'll sometimes hang out in there. But I will occasionally end up on the floor, but I'm pretty much always found in the design session. So I think that'll be the same going to Vancouver for me.
Very cool. Trevor, we were at the Atlanta Summit together, and you may or may not have been in Paris. It was a whirlwind. I don't even know that I was there half the time, but
right.
Very, very cool. What's your summit experience been so far?
So right now, just gearing up to talk to folks there, whether at the booth or in various sessions about VMware Integrated OpenStack, get the community noticing, hey, VMware is contributing as well. Other than that, just take in things such as the operations aspects and try to keep up with some of the design summits. It'll be interesting to see what the community is going to be focusing on as far as containers are concerned. There's 2 sides of the coin. People want to run containers bare metal or run containers within VMs. So it'll be interesting to see how those talks play out, and just looking forward to whatever other new technology discussions come up during the summit.
Very cool.
The one thing I will say, Eric, about the summits is I've recommended this to a number of people, is if you can afford to get to the summit, whether through an employer or on your own, and you're interested in OpenStack, it is, I think, the #1 way to get information about OpenStack. Even more so than hiring a company to teach you OpenStack. You will learn so much there about what's going on in the ecosystem of OpenStack, but also, there's plenty of opportunities to actually get training while you're there. So I think whatever it is now, $500, that you can't beat that.
Yeah, definitely. OpenStack has been the most hands-on friendly. OpenStack Summit has been the most hands-on friendly event that I've ever been to, including there's been a perennial session about how to make your first contribution to the foundation, and that kind of stuff. You can't really put a dollar value to it. It's above and beyond what you're paying for the registration, and if you're an active technical contributor, as Greg mentioned before, you get it for free. So you might as well take advantage, pay for that plane ticket, and come on up.
There you go.
And even doc changes count for ATC. So if you add that period to that one missing period in that doc, that counts.
I wish I could not joke about it and say that it literally is down to a single letter correction, but that was the first contribution that I submitted, was just a typo, and going through the process, it took me, I just did the old-fashioned way. I went into GitHub, I made the change, I put in the PR, and of course the pull request gets denied because they say you got to go through Jarrett, and I spent the next 2.5 hours setting up Jarrett on my machine and going through this whole process, and pulled it down, submitted it, only to get the big thumbs up. All right, cool, thank you for your contribution, which I don't even know if it'll eventually arrive there, but it was a bit of a process. So to be able to walk someone through that and help them to be a part of it, like you said, because docs are a huge area, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get on board with it, is to contribute to docs and to training, because I know the current training manuals right now are set for Icehouse, so we're missing content on Juno, and that's just because we have to feed this with the community. Unfortunately, there's only so many human bodies that can be sort of tasked with it, and it's volunteer work. So it's, I'm hoping to be able to commit some time, and I know my company, we do as much as we can, internally to help to educate outwards. I've done through stuff, with vBrownBag, and this is a great opportunity. So through our Green Circle community, we're going to keep building out some education. I've got an OpenStack boot camp coming up at Interop, and I know, Craig, you've got some stuff there as well. And maybe, when we talk about the education, what if you could give a couple of quick tips to first timers, because so we did have a question that came in from VMIS33 on Twitter. She asks, what's any tips for OpenStack first timers at the summit? What's a kind of a cool thing to try first, and where to start? Craig, what do you think?
Well, if you're going to the summit, first thing you have to do is sign up for all the parties. So make sure you get into the parties, because they're typically very good. Of course, although in Paris, of all the summits I've went to, the one party that everyone always talks about was the HP party in Paris, and I happened to miss that one party out of all the parties that were ever had at these summits. So definitely do that. But if you're looking to get into OpenStack, I think there are a number of review sessions that I've seen over the years. I've seen, in fact, my first summit, there was a session by Morantis which gave a general overview of how OpenStack works. That was extraordinarily helpful for me as a new user. I know that SwiftStack, typically every summit gives a couple of sessions about the inner workings of Swift as well. They do that on a regular basis in various cities across the United States. But if you're ready to actually get down and dirty, I would say, as was mentioned before, start small. DevStack is definitely a way to get started. It's definitely not meant for production, but use some of the tools out there. There's a strong Chef community, there's a strong Puppet community, and plenty of Ansible playbooks out there to get started. I typically recommend that people use a small number of nodes, 1 node, 3 nodes, just to get their feet wet, and go from there. Ask questions, and plenty of people both on Twitter, on IRC, that are willing to help people get started. So.
Now, Trevor, I'm going to task you with the next question that came in. This is coming in from VMUG Vancouver. This is we've got our VMware community sitting in and watching this as well, so it seems appropriate to send this one your way. Many distributions use different versions of components and only support specific hypervisors. So what are your thoughts on, in general, when we have hypervisor-specific features and hypervisor-specific distributions? I mean, obviously, VMware is one example that obviously their key focus is around the VMware hypervisor ecosystem, but other folks have said, Xen only, KVM only. What do you think about vendors innovating towards a particular hypervisor, and what's kind of the good and bad of doing that?
Well, I would say as a customer, you guys are ultimately the boss. You may have existing infrastructure, hopefully on VMware, but there's other hypervisors out there. So whatever infrastructure that you have, talk to whatever provider or whatever vendor that you're working with. The VMware drivers are open source and can be integrated with any distribution that's out there. So, and a lot of the distribution vendors, including Mirantis and some of the others, are doing work with us to enable their customers to not just be successful on KVM, but also leverage their existing vSphere investments. So at the end of the day, talk to your vendor about what you're trying to do. They should be partnering with you with whatever goals you have for your infrastructure, and let them know what you have and what you would like to run. I mean, you guys again are the boss, so you tell them what to do, and most likely they're going to work with you, and hopefully it's more of a partnership type of relationship, so that it's an ongoing thing where you build trust over time, and not just some kind of adversarial relationship. If you see that early, I would suggest maybe reevaluate what you're doing and who you're working with.
Definitely, yeah. And another question that came in as well, and those are definitely strong things. Partnership is a big thing. Not only is it a community, but it's a partner ecosystem. We've helped to connect folks through internal technology partners that VMturbo has. And obviously your teams have done the same thing. You kind of have these great horizontal partnerships that are developed within the vendor ecosystem that maybe they aren't already engaged with, whether it's somebody that we've done work with. We've done a lot of work with Red Hat versus some of others have had great experience with HP or with Mirantis or whoever it's going to be. So yeah, it's definitely good. Like you said, be active in the conversation with your vendors and your current partners and talk to them. And the good thing is, drive the question. Go to your partners and to your VARs and say, hey, if you were going to look at OpenStack, what's the direction that you think you would take us? And it's interesting because they may not be really ready to take that question. That may tell you about what you want to do when you look at going down the road with it. I know another question came in, and this is it's a tough one because we saw a very powerful community-driven partner that we lost very recently with Nebula. It's seen that unfortunately there's an open source business model that's challenging more so than an open source ecosystem. What do you guys see right now as challenges in OpenStack succeeding? Not only we see how we'd like it to grow, but what are the real challenges that you think are ahead in the next very short while about OpenStack as a product and an ecosystem being able to be successful at the market? Craig, what do you think on that?
So I don't know. First of all, I would like to thank the Nebula folks for all the work that they did for the community. I think of all the companies that were out there, they had some of the most outstanding talent in terms of OpenStack. The OpenStack community, and they did a lot of really great work over the years. I think that, and from that, of course, we saw a whole bunch of articles that basically are I would characterize it as quite a bit of FUD around whether OpenStack is viable or not. And I don't think that a single vendor, bowing out a little bit early makes or breaks an entire ecosystem. So I think there will be challenges around that, just in terms of how people perceive OpenStack. At the same time, I think this is I've alluded to this a lot, and I've been saying it for many years. I think there has to be a focus on making it a viable platform for end users. I think the reason why we've positioned ourselves as a service offering is that we believe, like I said earlier, is that you should stick to your core competency. You should own your uptime, and you should not have to worry about things that are OpenStack specific at this point. Maybe in 5 years it'll be different, where someone can have a turnkey OpenStack and be able to deploy that on site, and we just don't see that right now. Where we're positioning ourselves is that we will take care of all that for you. So I think that's, for me, that in OpenStack, that could be an inflection point where there's a renewed focus on operations, but at the same time, I tend to fall on the small tent argument. So there's that question like, okay, what is OpenStack? We have this DevCore exercise going on, and it's been going on for quite a while, but what composes OpenStack, and what should be core to OpenStack? If you were to ask me, I'd say it's those core components that you're going to use in every single stack. It's going to be like Amazon was in its early days. It's going to be EC2. It's going to be EBS. or in our cases Nova and Cinder, ELBs with load balancing and stuff like that. I think we have to be careful about, I think we should bring in other projects, but I think we have to be careful about how we bring them in and what kinds of focus we place on them in terms of making what I want to see is basically the core being rock solid, and then start to expand a little bit on those higher level or higher order features. So I think those are some areas that I would focus on if I were either the technical committee or the board.
Very cool. We're winding down to the tail end of the session, so I wanted to take a couple minutes here and say a big thank you. Definitely, I agree. Not only to our folks that we talked about Nebula, and Chris Kemp is obviously a huge contributor and has been a great voice in the ecosystem. All of the people at Nebula were and agreed. I wrote something that said that having Nebula does not signal the end of OpenStack any more than the PayPal story signals the end of VMware. These are great sort of headline leaders, and in our world of left versus right media, we've got the same thing in technology. It's just that left versus right is a vendor, and so we've seen some things. But again, community is an important thing. I've been very proud of the work that my team is doing here, with the Green Circle stuff, and we want to keep growing this. To both of you, Craig and Trevor, for coming on board and helping out today. Thank you very much. The overall OpenStack ecosystem is very powerful. It's very fun, and it's very challenging. And I like to embrace all three sides of that, and going into Vancouver, definitely going to keep doing that. So for folks who want to find out more, we can continue to engage. Go to the home link on the Green Circle page, and feel free to, if you're not already signed up, sign up. It's free. It's not. There's nothing crazy about this. This is literally an open community, and I'd love to chat. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. Again, you can at Disco Posse. And you can reach out to me through the Green Circle. So Craig, thank you. What's the best way for folks to reach you if they wanted to say thanks and ask any questions?
Yeah, Twitter at Craig Tracy, right at the bottom there. I'd be happy to meet people that are interested in OpenStack and talk OpenStack. So feel free to reach me there.
Now, Trevor, you don't have the advantage of having these. We're going to make you read it out, but you've got a nice easy one. How do we get a hold of you if we need to?
Sure. So on Twitter, I'm at VMTrooper, and same thing is the domain name for my blog, vmtrooper.com. And for any folks out there that are just getting their feet wet with configuration management and other aspects of DevOps, pick up DevOps for VMware administrators. Even if you're not running vSphere, those principles that I cover and my co-authors cover in the book are great to get your feet wet with technology.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Thank you, everybody who's been watching live. Thank you to the folks that are going to watch this after the fact. This is the first Green Circle Live, first of many. We're looking forward to being able to bring this kind of conversation forward. If you have any ideas on content that you'd like to see, feel free to pop a comment in the Green Circle, and we'll happily build something towards that. So thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you again next month.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Later.
Bye.